The Great Hall on Prime had never seen so many different alien species in one place. Representatives from thousands of worlds filled the massive chamber, their voices creating a sound like rushing water mixed with electronic static. Some walked on 4 legs, others floated in clear bubbles filled with glowing gas. A few were just patterns of light that moved across special screens. Admiral stood at the center podium, his blue skin darker than usual with stress. His 4 arms moved quickly as he spoke, pointing at the holographic display that showed the galaxy. Red zones marked the areas where entire star systems had simply disappeared. "The situation is worse than we thought," said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall through translation devices. 47 systems are gone, not destroyed, gone. The void swarm takes everything. The planets, the stars, even the space dust. They turn it all into their ships and weapons. A wave of fearful sound swept through the crowd. The tall, thin representatives clicked their teeth nervously. The rock-like warriors who never showed fear shifted uncomfortably on their stone legs. "How many of our people?" asked Ambassador N. Her species looked almost human except for the silver skin and large, dark eyes that seemed to see everything. 2,700,000,000,000 confirmed dead or missing, replied. "Our combined fleet strength is down to 28%. Every time we think we understand their technology, they change it. They learn from every battle and become stronger." The chamber fell silent. These were the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Their technology could move stars and create life from nothing, but against the void swarm, they were losing badly. "The defense line will fall within days," continued. "Our best military minds have run every simulation. The Strategic Council, the war computers, even the battle masters. They all reach the same conclusion. We cannot win this war." General of the stood up, his massive form blocking the light from several glow panels. "Then we die fighting," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. "Better to fall with honor than to run like scared younglings." "Honor will not save our children," N said quietly, "or our worlds, or our future." She stood and walked to the center of the hall. Her movement was graceful, like water flowing uphill. Every eye and sensor focused on her as she began to speak. "There is one option we have not considered," she said. "One species we have not asked for help." Confused sounds filled the air. Representatives looked at each other with expressions that meant the same thing across all species: complete confusion. "We have contacted every member of the Galactic Council," said. "Every advanced civilization in known space has already committed their forces." "Not every species," N replied. "We have not spoken to the humans." The reaction was immediate and loud. Laughter from some species, angry chittering from others. A few representatives made sounds that needed no translation. They were clearly insulted by the suggestion. "The primitives from the Rim worlds," scoffed Counselor, his electronic voice crackling with disbelief. "They barely have space flight. Their largest ships are smaller than our cargo vessels." "They are violent and unpredictable," added a representative, her needle-like fingers tapping rapidly. "Our first contact reports show they still fight wars among themselves. They have not achieved the peaceful unity necessary for advanced civilization." N waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "Yes, they are violent. Yes, they fight among themselves. But think about what that means. While we have lived in peace for thousands of years, they have spent their entire history learning how to fight and survive." "You suggest we ask savages for military advice?" General asked, but his tone was curious rather than angry. "I suggest we ask the only species in the galaxy that has never stopped preparing for war," N replied. "Every other civilization reached the stars and chose peace. Humans reached the stars and brought their weapons with them." Dr. Thane, the elderly scientist, spoke up from his floating chair. "The few reports we have on human space forces are unusual. Their ships appear to be built for no purpose other than combat. No science labs, no diplomatic quarters, no cultural exchange facilities, just weapons and armor. Because they are barbarians, muttered Counselor. Or because they understand something we forgot, N said. The universe is not a safe place. Peace is something you have to fight to keep. The chamber buzzed with quiet conversations as representatives talked among themselves. The idea seemed crazy to most of them. Humans were barely more advanced than the cave-dwelling species on primitive worlds. They had only been in space for a few hundred years. Admiral pulled up human space on the holographic display. The small yellow section at the edge of the galaxy looked tiny compared to the vast territories of the Council species. Even if we wanted to contact them, he said, what could they possibly do against a force that defeated our combined fleets? Before N could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the hall. Emergency lights flashed as urgent messages appeared on screens everywhere. A young officer ran to Admiral and whispered in his ear. The Admiral's face went pale. The defense line has fallen, he announced, his voice shaking. 3 days ahead of schedule. The Void Swarm has broken through using new tactics we have never seen. They are moving toward the core systems. The hall erupted in panic. Representatives began calling their home worlds, preparing for evacuation or final defense. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process that their greatest military achievement had fallen so quickly. N raised her voice above the chaos. I call for an emergency vote. We formally request military assistance from the human species of Earth. This is madness, shouted Counselor. We would be asking children to fight our battles. We would be asking warriors to do what warriors do, N shot back. Every option we understand has failed. Maybe it is time to try something we do not understand. The vote was called immediately. Representatives pressed buttons, spoke into devices, or simply stood to show their choice. The results appeared on the main screen, 847 in favor, 312 against. Admiral stared at the numbers for a long moment. Then he turned to his communications officer. Open a channel to Earth, he ordered. Priority 1 direct to their planetary leadership. What should the message say, Admiral? The officer asked. Looked around the hall at the frightened faces of the galaxy's most powerful species. Representatives who had ruled star systems for now looked like scared children. The most advanced civilizations in known space were about to ask for help from a species they had always ignored. Tell them the truth, he said quietly. Tell them we need their help. The message was sent into space, racing toward a small blue planet on the galaxy's edge. None of the council members knew what the humans would say. Most expected to be ignored or laughed at by the primitive species they had never bothered to contact before. They had no idea they were about to wake up something that had been waiting for this moment for centuries. Deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, Fleet Admiral Sarah sat in the command center that officially did not exist. The room was carved from solid rock and lined with metal that could block any known scanning technology. Hundreds of screens showed information that would have shocked the galaxy if they knew it existed. The alien transmission had arrived 6 hours ago, had watched the message 17 times, studying every word and gesture of the desperate alien admiral. Her staff of the best military minds Earth had ever produced worked quietly at stations around her, analyzing the threat data the aliens had included. Ma'am, called Dr. James from his analysis station, I have the preliminary assessment you requested. Doctor was thin and pale from spending most of his life underground, but his mind was one of the sharpest weapons in humanity's hidden arsenal. He walked over with a tablet covered in charts and numbers that painted a grim picture. The Void Swarm represents an extinction-level threat, he said without any emotion. Their technology adapts faster than any known system. They consume matter at the atomic level and convert it to their own designs. If they are not stopped, they will eventually consume not just this galaxy, but every galaxy they can reach. Nodded slowly. She had expected this conclusion, but hearing it confirmed made the weight on her shoulders feel even heavier. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Based on their current rate of expansion and the aliens' defensive capabilities, 18 to 24 months before they reach our outer colonies. Maybe 6 more months after that before they arrive at Earth." The Admiral stood up and walked to the massive wall display showing the galaxy. The red zones marking void swarm territory were growing larger every day. Soon, they would swallow everything. "Doctor," she said, "prepare a full briefing for the President. Include everything project, the hidden shipyards, fleet strength, everything. It is time to tell him what we have really been building out here." 2 hours later, President Martinez sat in the secure briefing room beneath the White House, staring at information that changed everything he thought he knew about humanity's place in the universe. The presentation had taken 90 minutes, and his head was spinning. "You are telling me," he said slowly, "that while I have been making speeches about peaceful space exploration, we have been secretly building the largest military force in galactic history." "Yes, Mr. President," Admiral replied. "For 200 years every human leader has known this day might come. We have been preparing." General Hayes, head of the Space Force, leaned forward. "Sir, when we first detected alien civilizations, we noticed something important. They were all peaceful. No military conflicts, no arms races, no preparation for major wars. They had achieved what we call peace through prosperity." "And you saw this as a weakness?" the President asked. "We saw it as an opportunity," Admiral answered. "While they built beautiful cities and amazing art, we built weapons. While they explored the universe for knowledge, we prepared for war. We knew that someday, something would come that their peaceful nature could not handle." The President pulled up the fleet data on his screen. The numbers were staggering. 50,000 combat vessels of various sizes, from single-pilot fighters to massive dreadnoughts that carried entire armies, all built in secret shipyards hidden throughout the outer solar system. 200 million personnel, he asked, looking at the crew numbers. "Every human settlement beyond Mars is essentially a military base," explained General Hayes. "The miners on Titan, the researchers on Europa, the colonists on Ceres, they are all trained soldiers. Their civilian jobs are cover for the real mission." Doctor activated a new display showing ship designs. "Mr. President, while alien vessels are multi-purpose platforms designed for exploration and diplomacy, every human ship has one primary function: to destroy enemies as efficiently as possible." The ships on the screen looked nothing like the sleek, elegant alien vessels they had seen in the intercepted communications. Human ships were angular, heavily armored, and covered in weapon systems. They looked like exactly what they were: instruments of war. "The aliens think we are primitive," Admiral said, "because our technology looks crude compared to theirs. They do not understand that we made it crude on purpose. Their weapons are precise and elegant. Ours are designed to keep working even when half the ship is blown apart." President Martinez studied the tactical analysis. Human military doctrine was unlike anything the aliens used. Where they relied on formations and planned strategies, humans trained for what they called controlled chaos. Every soldier, every ship captain, every unit commander was taught to adapt and improvise. "Show him the test results," Doctor said quietly. A new screen appeared showing battle simulations. Human forces against theoretical alien fleets, human forces against the void swarm based on the data provided, human forces against every known military force in the galaxy. The results were the same in every simulation: human victory, usually by wide margins. "How is this possible?" the President asked. "Because we think differently," Admiral replied. "They fight like civilized beings with rules and honor. We fight like humans who know that sometimes survival means doing whatever it takes to win." The president was quiet for a long time, processing everything he had learned. Finally, he looked up at the assembled officers and scientists. "What are you recommending?" "We go," Admiral said simply. "All of us. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have built. We show the galaxy what humanity is really capable of." "And if we lose?" "Then at least we go down fighting," General Hayes answered. "But sir, we will not lose. This is what we have trained for our entire lives. This is what our species was built to do." The president stood up and walked to the window that looked out over Washington. Somewhere up there, beyond the sky, alien civilizations were dying because they had forgotten how to fight. They needed someone who remembered. "Admiral," he said without turning around, "you have my authorization to activate Project. Take our fleet and show the galaxy what happens when humanity goes to war." Within hours, secret bases throughout the solar system came alive with activity. Ships that had waited in hidden docks for decades powered up their engines. Soldiers who had spent years pretending to be miners and researchers revealed their true purpose. The greatest military force in galactic history began to move. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, the dreadnought Terran's Fury. Through the viewing port, she could see hundreds of other ships taking formation. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and massive battleships that carried enough firepower to level planets. Her communications officer approached with the final crew reports. "All ships report ready, Admiral. Total fleet strength, 50,000 vessels, 200 million personnel. All weapon systems are online and fully loaded." Nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. Every human in the fleet would hear her next words. "For 2 centuries, we have prepared for this moment," she said, her voice carrying across space to every ship. "The galaxy sees us as primitive warriors from the outer rim. Today, we show them that sometimes, being primitive warriors is exactly what the universe needs." She paused, looking out at the vast fleet that surrounded her ship. "We are not going out there to conquer or to rule. We are going to remind the galaxy what it means to fight for something greater than yourself. Today, humanity takes its place among the stars." The fleet began to move, thousands of ships turning toward the edge of the solar system where jump gates would carry them across the galaxy. Behind them, Earth continued its normal daily routine, unaware that their species was about to become legend. Admiral smiled as she watched the stars ahead. The aliens had called for help, expecting maybe a few primitive warships and some eager volunteers. They were about to get something much more dangerous: humanity at war. Commander Lee watched her sensors with growing confusion as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the ruins of the defense line. The alien officer had expected maybe a dozen primitive ships, perhaps a few hundred volunteers eager to help their galactic neighbors. What emerged from the jump points all her expectations. 50,000 ships spread across space in a formation that looked like controlled chaos. The vessels were smaller than the massive dreadnoughts her people built, but they moved with a precision that seemed impossible. More disturbing was how they looked. Every human ship was covered in weapons, armored like ancient siege machines, built for no purpose except to destroy enemies. Communication from the human fleet commander, her operator, reported, his voice uncertain. "Put it through," Lee ordered. The main screen flickered and showed a human female with short gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. Her uniform was simple and practical, nothing like the elegant robes worn by council admirals. "This is Fleet Admiral Sarah of the Terran Defense Force," the human said. "We received your call for assistance. Please transmit coordinates of all void swarm positions and move your vessels to a safe distance. We will handle the situation from here." Lee blinked in surprise. "Admiral, with respect, we should coordinate our attack strategies. The Void Swarm uses adaptive tactics that require careful planning to counter." The human's expression did not change. "Commander, We appreciate your offer, but human forces operate under different tactical principles. Send us the coordinates and pull back. Trust us." Before Lee could respond, alerts began sounding across her bridge. Void swarm contacts were appearing at the edge of the system, dozens of the biomechanical constructs that had destroyed every fleet sent against them. "Admiral," Lee said urgently, "there are 87 swarm vessels incoming. Their configuration suggests a harvester group with full tactical support. We should retreat and request reinforcements." "Negative, Commander," Admiral replied calmly. 87 contacts confirmed. This is a light patrol force. We will engage immediately." The communication cut off, leaving Lee staring at her screen in shock. Light patrol force. The incoming swarm group was larger than most Council battle fleets. What happened next changed her understanding of warfare forever. The human ships did not form neat battle lines or execute coordinated maneuvers. Instead, they scattered across space like a swarm of angry insects, each vessel moving independently but somehow remaining part of a larger pattern. Captain Maria Santos piloted her destroyer Indomitable directly toward the largest swarm construct, a harvester the size of a small moon. Her 2 escort ships followed, but they were not following any tactical manual Lee had ever seen. "Torpedo launch in 10 seconds, Santos called over the communications channel. "Remember, we go in fast, hit hard, and get out before they know what happened." The 3 human ships accelerated to speeds that should have crushed their crews. They fired missiles that seemed primitive compared to Council plasma weapons, but something about them was different. The explosions they created tore through swarm armor that had shrugged off the most advanced energy weapons in the galaxy. "How are their projectile weapons penetrating adaptive armor?" Lee's science officer asked in bewilderment. Before she could answer, Captain Santos did something that made Lee question everything she knew about space combat. The human destroyer, its hull already damaged from swarm defensive fire, turned directly toward the massive harvester and accelerated. "She is ramming it," Lee whispered. "She is actually ramming a harvester." But at the last second, the Indomitable fired a spread of small objects directly into the harvester's main opening. Then the ship spun away, its hull glowing from heat and radiation. The harvester exploded from the inside. "What were those projectiles?" Lee demanded of her sensors operator. "Chemical explosives, Commander. Primitive by our standards, but they delivered them directly into the target's internal systems." Across the battle space, similar scenes played out dozens of times. Human ships fought like living creatures, adapting and improvising in ways that seemed impossible. They used tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare, and those tactics were devastatingly effective. Commander Jake led a squadron of fighters against a swarm tactical cluster. His 12 small ships faced over 30 enemy constructs, each one larger and apparently more advanced than anything humans flew. The fight should have been over in minutes with human defeat. Instead, pilots did something the swarm had never encountered. They ignored the enemy's superior technology and focused on confusing their adaptive systems. "Alpha Team, execute random pattern 7, ordered. Beta Team, switch to manual targeting. Charlie Team, shut down all electronics and go ballistic." The human fighters began flying in patterns that made no tactical sense. Some shut down their engines and drifted like debris. Others flew in spirals that served no apparent purpose. A few simply charged straight at enemy ships while firing every weapon they had. The swarm's tactical computers could not process what they were seeing. Their adaptive algorithms were designed to counter logical strategies and efficient tactics. They had no response to organized insanity. Within 15 minutes, all 30 swarm constructs were destroyed. Squadron had lost 3 fighters, but they had accomplished something no Council force had ever managed. They had confused the Void Swarm's intelligence. Admiral watched the battle from her command bridge with the cold satisfaction of someone whose plans were working perfectly. Every human ship captain had been trained for this moment, taught to fight in ways that alien minds could not understand or predict. "Status report," she ordered. "All swarm contacts destroyed," her tactical officer reported. "Minimal human casualties. The enemy attempted 17 different adaptive measures, but none were effective against our tactics." Nodded and opened a communication channel to the alien commander, who had been watching the battle. "Commander Lee," she said, "this is Admiral. The swarm patrol has been eliminated. Please provide coordinates for their next largest concentration." Lee's face appeared on screen, her expression showing a mixture of awe and fear. "Admiral, how did you destroy them so easily? Our most advanced weapons barely scratched their armor." "Because you fight like civilized beings," replied matter-of-factly. "You follow rules and use logical tactics. The Void Swarm learned to counter civilization. They have never faced barbarians who fight to win at any cost." The alien commander was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "What do you need from us?" "Intelligence on their larger forces and supply lines," answered. "We will handle the actual fighting. This is what humans do best." As the human fleet regrouped and prepared for the next engagement, word of their victory spread through the Council's communication networks. The species that had been considered primitive outcasts had just accomplished something the galaxy's greatest military minds said was impossible. They had made the Void Swarm retreat. Admiral stood at her command station, looking out at the stars where more enemy forces waited. For the first time in 3 years, the unstoppable alien invasion had been stopped. More importantly, for the first time ever, they had been forced to run from a fight. She activated the fleet communication system to address her forces. "All ships, this is Admiral. Today we showed the galaxy what human military doctrine looks like in practice. The enemy is learning that their adaptive technology means nothing when faced with tactical insanity and controlled chaos." She paused, watching as her ships formed up for the next jump. The Void Swarm consumed 47 star systems because they never faced an enemy that fought like us. Today, that changes. Today, we begin taking back the galaxy one system at a time. The human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind the wreckage of an enemy force that had been considered unbeatable. For the aliens watching, it was their first glimpse of what humanity would become known for across the galaxy. They were not just warriors. They were something far more dangerous, warriors who had never forgotten that sometimes winning meant doing whatever it took, no matter how crazy it seemed. 3 months after the first human victory, the Crimson Nebula stretched across space like a bloody wound in the universe. The massive cloud of gas and ancient stars had become the site of the largest Void Swarm concentration ever discovered. Over 200,000 biomechanical constructs surrounded a facility the size of a small planet, converting matter from dozens of captured worlds into new weapons of war. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, studying the tactical display that showed the impossible odds her fleet faced. Intelligence reports indicated the facility was not just a construction center. It was some kind of central processing node that coordinated swarm activities across multiple sectors. "Ma'am," her intelligence officer reported, "Council forces estimate it would take their entire remaining fleet 6 months of continuous assault to even damage that installation. They recommend we wait for reinforcements." Looked at the swirling red clouds that hid the enemy base from direct observation. "How long do we have before they complete their current construction cycle?" 72 hours, Admiral. After that, they will deploy enough new units to overwhelm our remaining Council allies. The decision was simple. Waiting was not an option. "Signal the fleet," ordered. "All ships prepare for immediate assault. Operation Stellar Storm is approved." What happened over the next 3 days became the most studied battle in galactic military history. Commander David led the 7th Attack Squadron toward the outer edge of the nebula, where dying stars cast strange shadows through the cosmic dust. His mission was considered suicide by every tactical analysis the Council had run. He was going to weaponize a star. Engineering team, status report on the stellar manipulation devices, called over his ship's communication system. Modifications complete, sir, his chief engineer replied. We have successfully converted 12 industrial mining platforms into gravity wave generators. If our calculations are correct, we can trigger a controlled collapse in star designation CR7. Nodded grimly. The plan was insane even by human standards. They were going to cause a star to go supernova, then use artificially generated magnetic fields to direct the explosion like a weapon. It violated several laws of physics and would probably destroy half his squadron in the process. All ships begin stellar engineering sequence, he ordered. Remember, we only get one shot at this. 12 ships moved into position around the dying star, their modified mining equipment creating gravitational distortions that nature never intended. The star began to collapse faster than it should have, its nuclear fusion spiraling out of control. When CR7 exploded, the force was visible from 3 systems away. But instead of expanding in all directions, the massive release of energy was channeled through magnetic fields toward the swarm facility. The concentrated power of an entire star struck the enemy installation like the hammer of an angry god. The facility's shields, designed to withstand conventional weapons, simply vanished. The explosion tore through the massive structure, destroying 3 years of construction work in less than 30 seconds. Commander's voice crackled over the communication channels, barely audible through the cosmic interference. Target destroyed. 7 ships lost, but the package was delivered. The galaxy's biggest fireworks show is complete. While was rewriting the laws of stellar warfare, Captain faced a different kind of impossible situation. Her heavy cruiser Retribution had been cut off from the main fleet by a swarm of enemy fighters, and enemy fire had knocked out main power, weapons, and propulsion. By every military manual ever written, she should have ordered her crew to abandon ship. Instead, she did something that became legendary throughout human space. "All hands, this is the captain," her voice echoed through the powerless ship. "We may be dead in space, but we are not dead yet. Engineering teams, I want manual loading on all torpedo tubes. Navigation, plot firing solutions using emergency chemical backup systems." Her crew looked at her like she had lost her mind. Loading heavy torpedoes by hand was physically almost impossible. Firing them without computer guidance was like trying to hit a moving target while blindfolded. "Ma'am," her weapons officer said carefully, "manual loading will take 6 times longer than normal. Without targeting computers, our accuracy will be less than 15%. "Then we fire 6 times as many torpedoes," replied, "and we get close enough that 15% accuracy is still lethal." For the next hour, the Retribution drifted through space like a piece of debris, while her crew performed miracles of improvisation. Teams of sailors hauled massive torpedoes through corridors using nothing but muscle power and determination. Officers calculated firing solutions with paper and pencils when their computers failed. When enemy ships moved in to finish off what they thought was a disabled hulk, they discovered their mistake too late. The dead cruiser suddenly came alive with weapons fire, launching volleys of torpedoes that had been aimed and fired by human hands and human minds. 17 enemy constructs were destroyed before the swarm realized what was happening. By then, rescue ships from the human fleet had arrived to tow the Retribution to safety. "How?" Commander Lee asked Admiral during their post-battle communication. "How does a ship with no power continue fighting?" "Because the ship is not what fights," replied. "The crew fights. Human crews are trained to keep fighting even when everything else fails. But perhaps the most significant development was something that took weeks to understand fully. Doctors' analysis teams had been monitoring swarm behavior patterns throughout the campaign, and they noticed something unprecedented. The Void Swarm was afraid. "Look at these movement patterns," Doctor explained to Admiral during a secure briefing. For 3 years, swarm forces advanced in straight lines toward strategic targets. Now they are taking longer routes to avoid systems where human forces might be present. He pulled up tactical displays showing recent swarm deployments. Instead of the aggressive, direct assaults that had characterized their previous attacks, enemy forces were showing clear signs of caution. "They are trying to avoid us," said studying the data. "More than that, they are learning to fear us. Their collective intelligence has categorized human forces as an existential threat. When possible, they retreat rather than engage." This development had consequences that reached far beyond military tactics. Word spread through the galaxy that the unstoppable Void Swarm was running from fights. Worlds that had been preparing for evacuation began organizing resistance movements. Council species that had written off entire sectors began planning counterattacks. The psychological impact of human success was changing the entire character of the war. Admiral reviewed the campaign's status during her daily briefing. In 3 months, her forces had liberated 12 systems, destroyed over 40% of known swarm construction facilities, and forced the enemy to abandon their strategy of direct confrontation. More importantly, they had proven something the galaxy had thought impossible: the Void Swarm could be beaten. "Admiral," her intelligence officer reported, "we have located what appears to be the central swarm command node. Long-range reconnaissance indicates a massive installation beyond the galactic rim, possibly the origin point of the entire invasion." Studied the data, noting the incredible defenses surrounding what could only be described as the enemy's capital. Attacking such a target would require committing her entire fleet to a battle with no guarantee of victory or escape. "Recommendations?" she asked her staff. "Every tactical analysis suggests this is suicide," her operations officer replied honestly. "The defenses are unlike anything we have encountered. Even if we win, casualties would be catastrophic." Nodded, understanding the risks. Then she looked at the strategic situation. The swarm was adapting to human tactics, learning to counter their unpredictable strategies. Every day they waited, the enemy became more dangerous. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "We end this where it started. Prepare for deep space assault. We are going hunting." As news of the planned attack spread through human space, volunteers began arriving from across the galaxy. Not just humans, but aliens who had seen what human courage could accomplish. Species that had never worked together began forming mixed crews on human ships. The fleet that prepared for the final assault was more than just humanity's military force. It had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly unified force fighting for the survival of all life in the universe. Admiral stood at her command station, looking out at the largest space fleet ever assembled. Tomorrow, they would jump beyond the edge of known space to face an enemy that had consumed an entire galaxy before coming to theirs. Win or lose, it would be the battle that defined humanity's place among the stars forever. The dark reaches lay beyond the edge of the galaxy, where ancient stars died in silence and space itself seemed darker than it should be. Here, in a region no council ship had ever explored, the Void Swarm had built their greatest creation. Admiral stared at the tactical display showing the enemy's central node, and even she had to admit the sight was terrifying. The construct was larger than most moons, a writhing mass of biomechanical technology that pulsed with alien intelligence. Around it, defensive platforms the size of asteroids floated in perfect formation, each one bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. "Final count, Admiral," her tactical officer reported. "Over 500,000 enemy constructs defending the central position. Energy readings suggest some kind of reality manipulation technology that we have never encountered before." Nodded grimly. Intelligence reports indicated this was not just the swarm's command center. It was their collective consciousness made manifest. Destroying it would not just end the invasion. It would kill the alien intelligence that had consumed an entire galaxy before coming to theirs. "Fleet status report," she ordered. "All 50,000 ships report ready, Admiral. Human crews at maximum efficiency. Allied vessels from 17 different species standing by for orders. Total personnel, 247 million beings, all volunteers." The Admiral looked around her bridge at the mixed crew of humans and aliens who had chosen to serve together for this final battle. Commander Lee stood at a tactical station, her blue skin pale with nervousness but her expression determined. Even some warriors had requested to serve on human ships, claiming they wanted to learn how real fighters conducted war. "Open fleet-wide communication," ordered. Every screen in the massive fleet showed her face as she prepared to address the largest military force in galactic history. Humans and aliens alike waited for her words, knowing that the next few hours would determine the fate of every living thing in the universe. "Today we face an enemy that has destroyed entire civilizations," she began, her voice carrying across space to nearly 250 souls. "They have consumed worlds, enslaved species, and turned the very matter of creation into weapons of destruction. They believe they are unstoppable because they have never faced what we represent." She paused, looking out at the vast fleet that surrounded her flagship. "We are not just human forces or council species fighting separately. Today, we fight as something new, as guardians of life itself. Every species, every world, every family that calls this galaxy home stands behind us." The communication channels crackled with responses in dozens of languages, but the meaning was universal. They were ready. "All ships begin final assault. Show them what happens when the galaxy fights back." The Battle of the Dark Reaches began like no military engagement in recorded history. Instead of neat formations or coordinated strikes, the Allied fleet attacked like a living storm of controlled chaos. Human ships led the charge with their impossible tactics, while alien vessels provided support and followed the patterns their human allies created. Captain Sarah Park commanded the assault cruiser Humanity's Fury, leading the deepest penetration toward the central node. Her mixed crew of humans and had trained for months to work together, combining human unpredictability with alien precision. "Incoming reality distortion," her alien science officer warned. "The enemy is literally changing the laws of physics in our vicinity." Space around them began to twist in ways that hurt to look at. Weapons fire moved in curves, ships suddenly found themselves flying backward, and gravity seemed to work sideways. The swarm's ultimate defensive technology was reshaping reality itself to protect their central consciousness. "All ships, ignore what your sensors are telling you," Park ordered over the communication channels. "Trust your instincts and keep moving forward. Physics is just a suggestion when you are fighting for survival." Human crews had an advantage their alien allies could not understand. They had grown up with stories of impossible heroes doing impossible things. When reality stopped making sense, they simply stopped believing in reality and kept fighting. The Humanity's Fury punched through defensive formations that should have been impenetrable, her crew manually targeting weapons when computers gave up trying to calculate solutions. They fired torpedoes that traveled through twisted space-time to strike targets that did not exist in normal dimensions. Meanwhile, Commander led a special assault force toward what his teams had identified as the node's critical weakness, a massive organic structure that seemed to be the physical housing for the swarm's collective intelligence. All units, this is. We have one chance at this. The central brain is protected by quantum barriers that adapt to any attack pattern. We need to hit it with something it cannot predict or counter. His plan was simple and completely insane. 12 ships would ram the structure simultaneously from different angles, while their crews manually detonated every weapon, reactor, and explosive device on board. It was guaranteed to kill everyone involved, but it might also destroy the alien consciousness that threatened all life in the galaxy. Volunteers only, announced. Anyone who wants to transfer to another ship has 60 seconds. Not a single person left their post. The kamikaze run began with ship Defiant Hope leading 11 others in a direct charge toward the central node. Enemy fire tore through their formation, destroying half the ships before they reached their target. But humans had learned long ago that sometimes winning required acceptable losses. Its final transmission became the stuff of legend throughout the galaxy. This is for every world you consumed, every life you stole, and every species you thought was too weak to matter. Remember this moment when the universe tells your story. The explosion that followed tore a hole in spacetime itself. The central node's defenses collapsed as the alien consciousness that controlled them died in seconds. Across the galaxy, void swarm forces simply stopped functioning as their guiding intelligence vanished from existence. The 3-year nightmare was over. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors and damage assessment teams, the full scope of what had been accomplished became clear. Humanity and their allies had not just defeated an invasion, they had eliminated a threat that could have eventually consumed the entire universe. Admiral stood on the bridge of her damaged flagship, looking out at the wreckage of the greatest battle in galactic history. The cost had been enormous, nearly 30% casualties among human forces, with some units suffering complete losses. But they had won. "Admiral," her communication officer called, "we are receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Council worlds, independent systems, even species we have never contacted before. They are all saying the same thing. Which is, thank you." 6 months later, Admiral stood in the rebuilt council chambers on Prime, wearing the dress uniform of the newly created Galactic Defense Force. The species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive barbarians now looked to them for military leadership and protection. Ambassador N, who had first proposed contacting Earth, delivered the formal address to the assembled representatives. "We called for help expecting soldiers," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Instead, we received guardians. Today, children across the galaxy sleep safely because humanity chose to wake up and fight for something greater than themselves." She turned toward Admiral and the human delegation. "Let no one forget the day the humans reminded us all what it truly means to protect what you love." The Council voted unanimously to grant humanity a permanent seat at the highest levels of galactic government. More importantly, they established the human military doctrine as the standard for all future defensive operations. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed itself. The peaceful civilizations that had forgotten how to fight learned from their human allies that sometimes peace must be defended with strength. Military academies were established on hundreds of worlds, teaching alien cadets the human principles of tactical flexibility and acceptable sacrifice. Admiral returned to Earth as a hero, but she knew her work was just beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there would always be threats that required the unique human approach to warfare. Standing in the same underground command center where she had first received the alien plea for help, she looked at the star charts showing human patrol routes throughout known space. The species that had once been ignored as primitive outcasts now served as the galaxy's eternal guardians. The fleet that had departed Earth as defenders had returned as legends. But more than that, they had returned as the proof that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places, and that the warriors who fight for others become something greater than warriors. They become the guardians of hope itself. In the years that followed, children of dozens of species grew up with stories of the day humanity answered the galaxy's call for help. They learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to do what is right despite that fear. They learned that sometimes the most civilized thing you can do is remember how to fight. And they learned that legends are not born from perfection, but from ordinary beings who choose to do extraordinary things when everything depends on them. The galaxy was safe, and humanity had found their place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as the guardians who would always answer when someone called for help.